welcome everyone. Tonight we are going to be discussing Euripides' play Medea, perhaps one of his most well-known plays, a play that has had a huge import in the last probably 100 some years in our culture. Really a terrific play, however you want to look at it. So I'm excited about diving into it with you, and let's see where the discussion takes us. So just by way of introduction, I'm sure most of you probably have read it many times, but just again, I like to set the playing field, get some baseline going on. So the story is obviously based on the mythology surrounding Jason and his wife Medea. This play was written by Euripides. Well, what I thought was interesting was that I didn't know this, but he the first time it was presented was in 431 BC, which you may or may not recall that this is the first year of the Peloponnesian War. So it's an interesting coincidence that we have a play that deals with some attitude, some conflict between Greeks and non-Greeks in a way, right? Medea representing the non-Greek character here, obviously, but also there's some other interesting parallels that we can perhaps think about. So the story starts kind of in the middle, and I want to step back a little bit just to again remind everyone of what has gone on before. So obviously the background is Jason's adventure, the quest for the Golden Fleece in the Argonauts, and this is how he meets Medea, who is a princess in this area called Colchis. It's somewhere near modern-day Georgia, coastal Black Sea, and so it's pretty good distance from mainland Greece, and also just culturally probably quite distant. So she's an exotic foreign queen. She falls in love with Jason and then helps him achieve his objective, which is to steal the Golden Fleece, which and overpower various obstacles in his way. As part of this journey, we should be noted that she commits a pretty atrocious crime. She invites her younger brother with him when they flee Colchis, and then when there's a chase after them, she kills him, cuts him in pieces, and spreads his body in the ocean. This way, kind of forestalling the chase, but because the father has to stop and collect his son's remains to bury him. So right there is a pretty gruesome deed. And then interestingly, they stop on the island where Circe lives. Circe is her relative. She is Circe's niece. Medea is Circe's niece. And so she actually asks Circe to cleanse her from this murder. So Circe performs the proper rituals, and they continue on their journey. But then when they get back to Greece, then the next thing that happens is Jason's father, Peleus, refuses to yield the throne. That was the original promise that he made to Jason. If his son retrieved the Golden Fleece, then he would step down as king, but he refuses to keep his promise. And so Medea again steps up to the challenge, and using her cunning and her skill in various potions, she convinces Peleus's daughters to chop him into pieces so that she could rejuvenate him. And she demonstrates her skill by supposedly doing this on an animal, a lamb, I think. And of course, when the daughters perform the murder their father, nothing happens. That's it. He's gone. So this is again just some background to Medea that we probably should be aware of before we start on into this story. So this story takes place now in Corinth, and the setup is that Jason has sort of cooled off in his affection for Medea. If he ever really had them, it's not really clear. Maybe we can talk about it, what you guys think. But it's not really clear that he ever really had any deep affection for her. But whether or not that's the case, he definitely shifts his focus to the king of Corinth, Creon, and his daughter Glauca. And Medea is told in no uncertain terms that she has to leave. She's the third wheel in this equation, and so she has to take the two sons that she bore Jason at this point and get out of town. So she is about to become an outcast, and that's the setup of the play. And of course, Euripedes is, and I want to talk about this a little more once we get into it, but I just want to mention it at the outset that Euripedes is just a masterful playwright, and he demonstrates his skill here in a way that's just really unmatched. In some ways, it was surprising is that he kind of lets you know what's about to happen, but instead of removing some of the tension, the knowledge of what's about to happen is actually bringing in more tension, and it's creating this suspense that's that makes you want to read on, because you feel like, yes, you know what's coming, but maybe, just maybe, there will be some turn of events. Maybe something will happen to avert the coming disaster. Something will transpire, and the events will go a different way. Anyway, so that's a little bit about the setup and the context. I have a lot of notes on the details. Maybe one more thing before we get into that. I want to mention Medea. The name Medea is very interesting, actually. I was looking it up just before the meetup. The word her name comes from the Greek word medo, which is a verb that means to either to counsel or to plan something, devise some sort of cunning stratagem. But it's interesting that this word is not necessarily Greek. It's like an Indo-European root that is shared among not just the Greek speaking people, but also it spreads over to even as far as Armenia, which is again not far from Colchis, the place where Medea is supposedly from. So that, which means that her name really could have been given to her as this tribute to her intelligence and her ability to devise and to scheme and to plot, which is everything that we read about her in this play. And in general, she is a person that excels at this. She is a really amazing strategist. Whatever you want to, whether you like her methods, you have to give her credit for being an amazing planner and executioner of those plans. So that's my quick background to this play. And now I want to open it up to you to see, just like get some feedback from those of you who have read it, what you like about it, what you think is important, what we should talk about tonight. I have a couple of things I want to mention further on, but before I do that, I just wanted to turn this over to you. The format is the same. Just type in exclamation point in the chat, and we'll try to give everybody a chance to share something. And if nobody wants to go, I'll keep talking. I don't mind talking. But I want to make sure that I'm not monopolizing the conversation. I want to hear from you as well. So Allison, go ahead.
I loved it. I really did. I loved it. I actually what I've been doing with these plays, I haven't been reading them. I'm watching movies of them, like a filming of the play. And this was actually the first time that I'd ever actually seen it. But what was kind of strange though is that I know Martha Graham choreographed a dance about it called Cave of the Heart. So I went back to look at the video of that, and I can only find a clip of a solo, and it was really weird. It was the solo of Medea when she just like before she goes completely off the deep end. And I realized I learned it before, which is so strange. So I danced it before I ever saw the play or read it. So, but the thing that I thought, there were so many things I thought about this play that were so interesting. One of them was that I thought that I could tell it was written by a man because it was projection, because women almost never become violent after a relationship ends. They get sad, they cry, they eat ice cream, they drink wine, they go on their like eat, pray, love tour, but they don't commit violence. Almost never. I mean, once in a while, but like it's all phenomenally rare. But men do all the time. So I feel like it's almost like sometimes men want to think women are going to fall apart if they go away, but women generally don't. And I think what was also interesting was like this enormous anger that she had towards the second wife. And I thought generally women in the first wife club, what they feel for the second wives is pity because they know what they're getting, you know? And they're not like in that first phase where they think they've got this great thing. They know who the person really is. And they're like, oh, all right, here you go. Good luck. That's mostly what I find. Um, but um, but the other things that I thought of were what was very true to women though is the cunning and like women aren't going to just fall out and be violent, but they'll do these backhanded things, and that is very true of how a woman would respond to it. But what I thought was really interesting though was the when she kept talking, Medea kept talking about all the things that she gave up for him. And that was the thing that drove her up the wall, that just drove her crazy, was that she gave up so much, gave everything for him. And that was what I felt like really rang true, because I thought so often women give up so much of who they are for their husbands and their children, and they put themselves last. And then years later, they start to think, what have I done? And that's true whether or not they get divorced or they're still married or they're whatever, but there's sort of a point where they start to say, what about me again? And it sort of comes back. So I thought that was a very, very an amazingly true thing that's still true to this day. But the other one about her killing the children, that again seemed, I mean, I know it does happen. It does, but it's so rare. I think most women would absolutely never do that ever. But I thought what was interesting is that when she hit the breaking point was when he was going to take the children. Because and that just seemed like something that people do where they want to just take, he wanted to destroy her, literally everything, take her homeland, take her, get out, go in exile, lose literally everything. And that was the point where she, lost it. But the other thing that I was thinking of is when she said, I care more about hurting you than I do about these children. It means more to hurt him than it was to have the children. I thought, what's kind of interesting is like I've talked to a few women recently who told me that they've never in their entire lives had any mothering instinct. It just wasn't in them. And I feel like we live in a world now where you can make that choice, but trying to imagine a world where women just had to have children no matter what. There probably were women who really had children and felt nothing for them or didn't value them. But it's very hard for me to feel because I had such a strong desire to be a mother. It's almost like inconceivable to me. But that's what I was thinking of, that maybe she was just one of those women who just never wanted them ever in the first place and had them, and then, you know, couldn't deal. But yeah, she was, but I think what's is so interesting about these Greek tragedies is it takes these ideas, it blows everything way out of proportion. So you're taking ideas that definitely exist in real life, and there are emotions and themes that people are still dealing with today, but it takes it to such a heightened level. But if you look at it on a simpler, smaller level, it's still very much relevant to this day, I think.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find. Thank you, Allison, for this. This is great. I'm trying to find the passage where Medea is sort of stealing herself. She is talking herself into committing the murder. And as you were describing this, I'm thinking, does Euripides really make it sound like she didn't love the children? And I think he's not. I think he's actually trying to tell us that she does have very deep feelings for them, and that's why she has to talk herself into this, even though she doesn't feel like it. And in fact, she realizes that she is not strong, or she needs to kind of put her emotions to the side, because otherwise they'll overpower her, and her love for her children will not let her do what she's intending to do, which is of course a terrible thing. I should also mention that while we're at it, this idea of Medea killing her children is actually apparently an invention of Euripides. The stories before Euripides' play did not include this this part. In fact, the children were potentially in the alternative endings, they were killed by Creon. So this part about filicide is his addition. There is also some debate about whether or not it was actually Euripides who came up with this, or whether it was another playwright, Neophron, who was writing at the same time and was a prolific writer, and perhaps Euripides stole the idea from him. So we'll never know, most likely which is the case. But regardless, this idea that she was not motherly, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about it too, because the type of personality that Medea has definitely doesn't lend itself to being sort of like this warm and compassionate and caregiving person. But at the same time, the way Euripides make it sound like she's having this inner struggle kind of makes me think that it was not out of indifference that she killed them, or that they were just a burden to her. Rather, it's the very fact that she loves them and kills them is what makes this play so agonizing, because we're agonizing with what's happening. We're agonizing with her and trying to understand what would it take to make someone commit such a heinous crime, kill their own children. Evanik, go ahead.
Yeah, I was reading a commentary about that, and they were saying because of the crime that she committed, against, she killed the king and the king's daughter for marrying Jason, to her, that she knew in the back of her mind that they would kill her kids, like that the people would take revenge on her kids, and that was part of the motivation for her to kill her kids. Was, she knew she had did this crime. She knew they were going to punish her, and they were going to punish her if they were kids. Now, part of it might have been, yeah, I mean, part of it definitely was she wanted to get back at Jason, but I think part of it, and maybe that stealing of herself, because she already knew she was like, you're going to get punished for this. You killed the king. You killed the king's daughter. The people are going to revolt against you. I think that's definitely true. I think one thing that Sharikant said is that, and it's true in this play, is that it shows the darkest side of people. I think I would kind of disagree with you, Allison. I think there's plenty of women that kill. If you watch Oxygen or Snapped or any of those, there's plenty of women that's willing to kill for revenge, for, you know, things of that nature. I think we have this delicate thing that this is something that females wouldn't do. I don't think that's true. I think we all have it in us. I don't think, well, I will say this, we all have that darkness in us, but most of us, men and women, would not act on it. There is a small percentage of men and there's a small percentage of women that would act on it. And I think this Greek play shows what happens when you act on it. And I mean, and part of it is that, Medea had given up so much, like you said, she had given so much of herself up, but she had given up her family. Like, she was exiled from her family because, she was helping Jason. And, he was like, oh, well, you could be a mistress. Like, what? Like, and his reason, it wasn't like he was in love with the bride that he was marrying either. It was a power play for Jason. And I think it almost made it worse. Like, like, oh, he didn't love me and he really doesn't love her. He's just like, oh, I have a chance to be royalty now. Like, it was just really that simple. Like, so I think Jason kind of brought his fate, and Greek plays definitely are great at showing how people sometimes bring this fate onto themselves. And I think too, in a sense, you can see how Jason brought this onto himself, just to be that cold and that calculating, and to give her like a consolation prize after she's given up everything for him. He's like, oh, you could be a mistress. I could, we could still, in today's world, we would call it, you can be my side piece. And it's like, is that really a consolation? And he's kind of like, you got to understand why I'm doing this type thing. So he has this cold and callousness of himself. So we see what happens when darkness meets darkness. Jason's darkness is he's going for power, essentially. That's it. And he's willing to do it at the cost of Medea and his kids. He's going to have her be, in a sense, as a mistress. That still cracks me up. Um, and his kids are going to be known as the mistress's kids, right? I mean, if you think about it, if Medea hadn't done what she did, and I'm not saying it's okay at all, but if she hadn't done what she did, he probably would have made it with her, with his wife, and had kids. And then what would have happened to her kids? They would have been tossed to the side. Like, they would have been
She
probably
was supposed to
relegated.
take them. That was the kind of the original deal, right?
But
She was told to take the kids with her, so she was exiled with her children together with them.
yeah, and so I mean, like I said, there's so I love it because it is so complicated, and it's so many things, and the emotions. I mean, I would like to say the emotions got the better of her, but the way she plotted to kill him and how she did it with the coat, and I mean, was it a coat or a cloak? I can't remember.
It was like a peplos. Yeah, it was a some sort of delicate outer garment for
Yeah,
people. Yeah, that she gave to Glauca.
yeah, and it was poison. I mean, it was a cruel death. It wasn't like she just drops.
Imagine
She,
being killed by a Chanel bag.
I know, and then your legs are burning and your arms are burning, and it's like she wanted her to feel the pain of it all. And then when the father tried to help her out, he felt the pain. It was like, no, she wanted to cause pain and she plotted. It just shows how love, like, you can love someone, and then when someone betrays you, you can grow cold just like that. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. That all interesting, very interesting points. I like your insight about the darkness and how most people are probably not even familiar with that because we're kind of normal. We assume everyone else is normal, in quotes, right? But in reality, we all have that darkness in us, and some people tap into it more than others. A minority, like you said, tap into that dark part of ourselves. I have to say that one thing just before I give the floor to Shrikant. we're going to do Shakespeare next time, but this is a perfect segue to Shakespeare. I mean, this play is very Shakespearean in its, I mean, there's just so much of Shakespeare in this play in terms of plotting, in terms of these sort of twists and turns and the coming demise. I mean, we're going to read Hamlet, and this is very similar in some ways. I was also thinking, there's several monologues here, notable monologues by Medea and also Jason, and very similar to Shakespearean monologues that kind of give us a very broad view of what's inside that person's heart. And maybe we could even read a couple tonight if we have time. I do want to read very quickly the passage that we were kind of dancing around with Medea stealing herself. So this is verse, if you have a verse translation, this is around verses 1240 and down from there. So she says, come, my heart, it's time to put your armor on. What use postponing now the evil deed, inevitable acts that must be done? Advance, my wretched hand, and grip the sword, grip hard and make toward life's painful finish line. No cowardice, and no remembering your children, how they were your dears, or how you gave them birth. Instead, for this one fleeting day, forget they're yours, and afterward make time to grieve. Although it's you who's killing them, and they were your lovely babes, and I'm a woman made of sorrow. So I just wanted to read that to underscore the struggle that she's obviously going through. It's not a quick fix or anything that she takes lightly. And that's what makes for a great drama, this whole tension. She is not at peace with herself. She is fighting herself. And as you read it, you're drawn into this vortex of conflicting emotions and moral choices that she has to make. Shrikant, go ahead.
Yeah, I find this play really interesting because there are so many deep themes, and Euripedes, kind of in a masterful way, deals with all of them in parallel. So one is a very deep theme of Greek versus barbarian. That's a very large theme in Greek thought. Like, okay, this is what Greeks would do, but what will barbarians do? To what lengths will they go? So that's always there at, as an undercurrent here. The second is the issue of justice. Clearly there is something wrong that Jason has done to Medea, but at the same time, what she does is kind of out of proportion with that. So there is the issue of justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when somebody has been wronged, what do you do? And what's the scale of what you do? And is that proper? Is that not proper? So all of those choices about justice. Thirdly, I find it really interesting, this Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, this sequence. And you can see the transformation of Greek culture in that sequence, because you have Aeschylus, which is just almost pure mythology and God and religion. Sophocles, where kind of moral people looking at very large choices, again, very close to the religion, but kind of more explicitly thinking things out. And then Euripides comes at the end of the sequence, which is actually very, as you're pointing out, it is kind of closer to the modern times of human nature itself and all the foibles and everything that can go wrong with human nature, is being portrayed. So there is this progression that is happening, which shows you the progression of the Greek culture. So these are the things I really find fascinating about this.
Agreed. Yeah, those are great. Thank you, Shrikant. On the subject of barbarian versus Greek, I want to call out a passage where Jason kind of presents his case, right? And he Medea makes her case originally, why she is unhappy, why she is mistreated, and so on. And Jason responds with his side of the story, if you will. And one of his assertions is that, if it wasn't for me, Medea, you would still be unknown to the world. You would still be in, just another barbaric queen in a barbarian kingdom. And of course, you have this sort of built-in, what's the word? I guess not xenophobia, but this chauvinism and some sort of cultural superiority that Jason pretty much assumes as a given. And there's definitely that in the Greek culture. I mean, they did look at a lot of adjacent kingdoms as below them. And we see that pretty much everywhere. We see that in Herodotus' histories, and the response of, for instance, that famous interchange between Solon and was it Xerxes? I forget, or Darius. But anyway, one of the Persian rulers, and the idea being that Greeks just have it figured out. They're civilized. They have the democratic rule, versus pretty much all the other places have a monarchic rule, which is to them barbarous. How can you have a society that is ruled by one versus by the will of the many? And so with that standard, they kind of look down on everyone else. And Jason does this pretty unabashedly. So he says, I pulled you out of this third world country, essentially. What are you complaining about? to couch it in modern terms. But she says, no, this is not what's important to me. Not fame, you're after fame and power, but I am after your affection, and that's the one thing you are withholding from me. What's interesting is, I want to just again remind you, if you Jason did not exactly arrange for a very romantic dinner, candlelight dinner and so on, to propose to Medea. What happened was, as they were fleeing, the party that was chasing them said, they stopped, they caught up with them at an island, and basically told the king of that island that if she hasn't been betrothed, then they have to give her back to her father and her father's domain. And so Jason quickly springs up and says, okay, let's get married. So that's the romantic story behind their betrothal. So with that in mind, again, I'm kind of wondering if he ever really cared for her, or if she was just a means to an end for him, a way to get the golden fleece. And it was just an unfortunate thing that she fell in love with him. Another parallel here is, of course, Aeneas and Dido. Dido is the unfortunate recipient of Venus's, Venus's charms. She falls for Aeneas and eventually kills herself because he cannot requite her affection. And here we have the same situation where, and Jason says the same thing. He says, "Woman, you're just upset that I'm not in love with you anymore. It's my sexual energy that you're missing." I mean, it depends on the translation that you're using, but in my translation, it's pretty much. He just says, "Look, you're just bitter that I'm not, hopping in bed the same pace with you as I was before. So if it wasn't for your lust, essentially, we could settle this in a civilized way. But you're so enamored by your whatever libido or something like that, and that you just can't make a rational determination of what's best for both of us." So he tries to appeal to her on this basis of, look, you've gotten a lot of benefits. You've been taken out of your barbaric country. You've been made a renowned sorceress among the Greeks. Everyone knows about you, and that is true. But at the same time, to her point, she is a stranger. And without the person that she has hitched her wagon to, she's a nobody. So there is that tension of who is right and who is wrong here in this. It's almost like a family court drama, except for in family court, you have a judge who decides and gives you apportions some sort of equitable distribution of property. But in this case, it's not about that at all. The scores are going to be settled in a violent way, in a despicable way, in a shocking way, and Euripedes is really masterful at putting this all together. And we're basically at every turn, again, we're trying to figure out, is the crisis going to be averted? Is the tragedy going to be averted in some way? And no, it's not. It's pretty much happens as he says it will. Ebonique, go ahead, and then Allison.
You just make Jason sound like a winner, But I think one thing that I thought of when you were talking is like, not to say that, most of us would not do what Medea did, right? Let's just be clear. However, you kind of relate to Medea in the sense that I think what Greek writers do is they really get into the psyche of the characters, right? So you can get inside of their headspace to realize, oh, this is why he did it. Because I'm like, well, why didn't she just go after Jason? Like, Jason's the one that did her wrong. But she wanted to see Jason in pain, right? She wanted to see him suffer just like she's suffering. And I think one of the things that Greek plays in general have this great thing of doing is having you understand your own psyche. And I think bringing it out into the real world is like, if you understand that, one, you could go that dark, you kind of avoid it at all costs, right? Once you see it in the character and you see the damage and destruction of innocent people, you're like, I don't want to be that person. So you kind of think about it, you're like, nah, no, not worth it. But I think too, I think when we look at modern times, there's a lot of things that human beings do that, it's not killing the kids, but it causes damage. Like I always see like in bad divorces, where the mother is, and the mother and the father are fighting over who gets custody of the kids and why, this person's not, and like they're fighting like this person's not an unfit parent. And then when the custody matter settles, they're bad talking the parents to the kids and not really taking into account how much damage it's doing to the kids. It's about them. And so if you look at this play, maybe not literally, but say to yourself, hey, what damage am I causing innocent people that have nothing to do with it when I'm bad mouthing, the other parent, or when you're fighting for custody? And like some of these custody battles go on for years. What is the damage? You trying to get the kid to pick sides, so just looking at that, like different ways in which your actions, which you may think are justified, hurt other people. And I think that's what Greek plays show. So I just wanted to add that point in.
Thank you. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking that, part of it, what Ebony was saying is really true, that you see a lot of that today, especially like with court cases and things like that. But you also have, a lot of her reaction was because this in a time when women had no way of supporting themselves other than through a husband. So you had to get married, you had to have children, you had to go where he wanted you to go. And then she's tossed aside into exile, and she would have been taken care of. But, she gave up it wasn't like she had a job and she could just go, on with her life and, go find a new boyfriend and call it a day, I mean, like nowadays, it's like men are like the boss. There's always another one, but back then, It was like if you lost your livelihood, you lost everything. So it was, you know, a very different deal then. But what I thought was interesting as I was like watching it was, why is it that some people are able to deal with whatever tragedy goes on in their life and then they move on, and some people are stuck in it for good, you know? And like Evanik was saying, like some people, they get a divorce, they're done. That's it, 6 months, you know. Some people will take their spouse to court for a decade, over and over and over and over, and they just can't just move on, you know? Or the same thing with like war. Why is it that some people come back from a war and they go on with their lives, and some people go back from a war and they wind up homeless? You know, any kind of tragedy that you can think of, like I don't know why that is, that some people are able to move on from it and some people are just frozen. And then I think what happens with it is that they become their worst enemy. And so what they're doing to themselves is actually worse than whatever the other person did to them. Because it's like they're poisoning themselves, they're allowing their hatred and their anger and their grief and their misery to destroy themselves. So they are literally hurting themselves more than whoever wronged them. And that's a thing that I can't figure out, because I've watched people that I've known handle things in different ways, and I can't for the life of me figure out why some people move on and some people don't. I don't know.
Yeah. I was hoping you were going to give us an answer to that at the end.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Right. No, it's true. It's true. I mean, especially is the point about self-destruction, right? So that's definitely happening. Now, again, this play it's interesting because it's not so clear how to evaluate the ending, for Medea. Is it a triumphant ending? I mean, she seems to, it's a classic case of reversal in one sense, right? You start out with her being on the brink of exile, disaster, possibly death, and she ends up being wafted away on a chariot that's given to her by Helios, the god of the sun. It seems like she is at the top, and she is mocking Jason and mocking her, those who would pursue her. And of course, she has secured a place for herself as well. She had, in the course of the play, we read about her making a very shrewd agreement with Aegeus, who is the king of Athens. And so she basically secures an oath from him that he will take care of her and will not give her up to those who would pursue her. So she has a place to go. She's leaving on a chariot. Is she the winner then? Is she the person? Is she like a role model for us to follow? And I know you're shaking your head, Evanik, but it's interesting that a lot of the people in the feminist movement have taken Medea as this heroine, role model of a strong woman, a woman who does not submit and goes her own way and successfully, makes fools out of men around her. So I will leave that as an open question. Is she a triumphant woman in this play? Is she the one that gets the best of everyone? Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how that can be the case. I mean, I know that maybe the fact that she is able to, get away with her crimes, but I think at some point what happens is, Jason is, the one who initiates it, leaving her, and so I think it turns her into something that is vindictive. She's no longer searching for anything like a form of justice. And I think that this is a big distinction, is that, that it's when you become corrupted yourself in the process, instead of like actually seeking like, some kind of retribution that is probably equal to you know, how you were hurt, and I don't even know how that would be back then, but I think there becomes something like there where you're basically degrading yourself, and you know, I think that if you were to look at this, is to show you that I think it shows the horror of what vengeance brings, versus the idea, you know, if it had been, well, no, that's it. I just think it's the depicting the you know, the problems with, like, you know, being obsessed with getting back somebody. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me, and it does oppose. It's the opposite of justice, I think, from that perspective.
Right. I tend to agree with you, but I'll have to say that it seems that it's hard to take that from the play itself, especially the way it ends. So in other words, you have to bring something extra, some extra sources to make this judgment. You can't really make this judgment, in my opinion, based on the text, because the text is pretty clear. This ends with her triumph. We don't hear about her, you know, we don't have a sequel 30 years later. Medea is in counseling, you know, or something like that.
Right.
So we end with a high point. She is on literally on a high horse at the end of the play, and Jason is the broken man, and you know, you have all these corpses strewn around her. So
isn't there a myth called the Ring of Ganges? I think there was, and essentially Socrates telling the story of where, you know, this man who found the ring, he murders the king and marries the queen, and there's this debate. I forget who he's debating, but essentially he's saying that his conscience is actually what catches up with him, so he's like torn, so he can't have this no, he can't possibly be happy. So that's the way I was looking at it, but I think you're right. The text doesn't allow you to probably make that assumption. But I kind of think of that every time I see these types of plays, like where somebody, you know, goes ahead and murders and gets
kills
away
everybody, gets away with it, gets away with murder, literally. Yeah. Okay. Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think I'm kind of overlapping a little bit with what Joe was saying, but in the Wikipedia article, it says, at this time in myth and history, helping one's friends and hurting one's enemies was considered a virtue. And it got me thinking about, you know, like our modern day ethics would kind of see that as bad if you lost that self-control and wanted to get that revenge on somebody, but you know, maybe not. Maybe the later loved ones, enemies, that came later. That's kind of the Christian ethic in the Bible. Maybe the other way. Maybe really. I mean, you see that in violent groups today. I'm not sure whether people are comfortable with me bringing in a political reference, but some people might have a violent attitude, like they did that, so I'm gonna go like kill them, and then the other people might say, well, I'm glad they got killed and rather than abducted, you know, like that kind of thinking. We see that today, the kind of the violence ethic. Some people have that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's a great point, Katie. Thanks for bringing this up. I was thinking about the same thing actually as I was preparing tonight. I couldn't help but think of the current events as the backdrop to all this, because this is a story about, like Shrikant was talking about, a proportionate and disproportionate response to something. And we are right in the middle of this very thing in the world today. And it's not anything new, right? It's been happening forever. You know, so the question is, and Katie, I'm glad you brought up the idea of us, you know, love your enemies, which did come later. And it was a shocking doctrine that Christ taught, that you need to turn your cheek and so on, turn the other cheek. and love your enemies, and you know, give your shirt to whoever asks of you, and so on. And I think what happens is we have in the Western culture, we have sort of dismantled the official acceptance of Christianity as like the religion of the West, but the ethics of Christianity are still with us today, whether we like it or not. And we have been swimming in this water like fish, and because we've been swimming in it for so long, forever, for, you know, it's part of our culture, this idea of being merciful, the idea of compassion, the idea of you know, showing compassion to your enemies and showing mercy and so on, that we've forgotten that this idea is actually not practiced and has not been practiced universally throughout all times in all places. And in the Greek culture, it certainly was not practiced, and there was absolutely no qualms about brutality and violence. I was actually thinking of Medea as a female counterpart to Odysseus in some ways. Odysseus, if you remember, also makes his way through life based on his wits and his ability to outsmart and out-devise and, you know, create these cunning stratagems. Very, very similar to Medea, whose very name is, as we said in the beginning, has to do with planning and stratagems and so on. So think of Odysseus and the famous bloodbath that he makes when he returns home, and he kills all those suitors, and you know, pays them back in full. There's no question of mercy, and there's very little question of proportionality of response. I mean, they were annoying and they were taking advantage of Penelope, but did they deserve to be slaughtered together with everyone else who was there at the moment? You know, that's that question never is never really raised, because there is no idea of, or there's no standard of kind of mercy and justice like we've gotten accustomed to today in the Western culture. Joe, did you have your do you want to say something?
No, I mean, I again, I think this comes back to the really important distinction between justice, which is a proportional response, to versus revenge and vengeance, which is cyclical. It kind of creates a cycle where you know, revenge begets revenge, and so it's something that yeah, it's a nasty cycle. That's all I was to say.
Okay. Evan, and then Allison.
One thing I was thinking about when Katie was talking about Christianity, and I was thinking, if you look back in the Old Testament in the Bible, it was very much a vengeful series of books. It was, you know, it started with God getting mad with Israel because they had sinned, and you know, he tells them that I'm going to leave you out there. Oh, what is the description? Like I'm going to leave you out there like a prostitute. I'm going to let I'm paraphrasing, of course. I'm going to let everybody rape you and,
Yeah, it was very
have their way.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, like I'm going to let all this happen to you. If you look at, I was just reading today the story of Jacob and his sons when, you know, the sister Diana or Dinah, I can't remember which one it is.
Mm-hmm.
Dinah was raped, and you know they pretend like, oh, you know, it's cool, and then they tell the people to like, and then the guy's like, well, I'm trying to, you know, marry her, and they're like, yeah, okay, you can do that, and then they're like, all you have to do is become circumcised. And so they do it, like, because the father wants to please the son. So all of the men go through this circumcision, and then they go and kill them all anyway. Like, they just slaughter them. And then when the other brothers come in and see it, they pillage. So it's kind of like one of those things when they say, you know, Christianity, like, you know, Jesus taught us to turn the other cheek. Yeah, but the previous history was a bit, you know, you know, I'm gonna get revenge and I'm gonna bleep you harder, you know? Um, it was kind of like that thing. And, even when you talk about Revelation, we were talking about this, and Jesus is coming back down to earth. He's coming down with the four horsemen, and he's taking out everybody, and it's not pretty. It is. He destroys. He puts boils on people. Like this. Like, I think this is a human thing. Like, now the more I think about it, we look at more and more about history. It's a human thing to plot revenge, and is it justified, or is it the revenge just? Um, I guess it depends on who's doling out the justice at the end of the day, because they will tell you that they were justified. Medea would tell you she was justified in taking away Jason's kids because of what she gave up, and he just left her on the side. So I think, in terms of justice, like what is just, I think it's the person who's doling out the justice that decides, right? Looking back in the Bible, Reuben and Simeon and Levi, they were like, yeah, it's just because, he treated our sister like a prostitute. So, yeah, it was justified to kill every single man in the village and, you know, not even give him a fighting chance. Sure. I mean, if you think about it like that, even in Christianity, definitely not squeaky clean. So I don't know. We kind of, now the more I think about it, we all kind of do it on different scales.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this because I think that a lot of times we think of the Bible as a single book, but it definitely has various strands in it, and some of the strands are much more violent and much more um, graphic and cruel, and there are other strands that are more compassionate and um, merciful and so on. The question is which strands influenced our culture? Probably both, if we're honest. And there's definitely been some of the Puritanism, and definitely there have been other things like Salvation Army and the movement for abolitionism and so on that were driven primarily by a lot of Christian sentiments. So both things have had a huge effect on our culture. But this is pre-Christian, right? For sure. So this is before the Gospels, before any of this, and yeah, it's all very graphic and all very unapologetic in terms of you wronged me, and I will wrong you, and I will do it in a way that you will never forget. And so this play is definitely stands out because of its kind of graphic quality and the shocking nature of the plot and what happens. And that's probably why Euripides added this part about filicide, because he realized that violence, for whatever it's worth, violence sells just like sex. You have to include, Shakespeare knew it, and Euripides knew it, and Nietzsche probably would say that this is, or Freud and Nietzsche together would say this is part of tapping into that darkness or that unconscious, the Dionysian part of us that is driven by all these wild passions. And that's what makes for a great story, right? When you do a hyperbole like that, and I think Allison, you mentioned this too, that these stories are always over the top. That's why they're over the top, because they, if they weren't, they wouldn't be so interesting to read. But because they're over the top, because they extrapolate into the areas that we typically do not allow ourselves to get into, because we realize it's destructive. But that's why they're so good, because we can see it without actually doing it. We can see what happens when you extrapolate into those hidden recesses of human heart and the kind of destruction that follows it, when that happens. So we can read and not do it, essentially. We can have that catharsis without actually going out and killing everybody and realizing that, well, perhaps that's not the right way, but we get definitely, we're drawn to read about it because of that. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that made Jason so awful is how, when he comes back and he kisses her and wants her to be the mistress, it's like, and I watched that and I was like, I actually have nicknamed this boomerangs. Like, men are boomerangs. They dump you, then they want to come back. They come back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Boomerangs. And it's like he's just playing with her emotions over and over again. And for her to have to go from the role of wife to mistress is so degrading, especially, at that time. And that's the thing, is I feel like it wasn't just, like she's losing his love, which, probably was never really there in the first place. It was losing her country, her family, her station in life, her new country, everything. And, again, it's not that what she did was, I mean, the killing the children is just completely unconscionable, but that's a weird one where, like, when you're seeing it in a book like that, you're like, oh, who would do that? Well, don't our tax dollars do that? I mean, in all honesty, all these wars that we pay for, we're always at war with somebody, where we're paying for weapons and they're killing babies all across the world. And yet we just go about our day like it's just, it's a pretty fall day. Let's go get a pumpkin latte. But meanwhile, we're paying for it. We're just not seeing it happen, So what does that say about us as a nation, really? Because not every country does it like us. Canada doesn't, that's for sure, and then I was, trying to think, like, I hadn't heard that feminists like praise Medea. I had never actually heard that one, but I'm just sitting here thinking, like, why? But then I guess when you really think, I mean, she gave up everything she had for this husband and the children. At the end, has none of it. And so I think that's what they're praising. That's the thing we forget about, is that when these women are always putting themselves, it's like they don't exist as their own selves. They only exist as somebody to take care of others, and their own individuality just disappears. And that's the one thing at the end, what you see is just the individual. And I don't like the means that she took to get there, but it is important that women are valued as individuals, not just, we weren't put on this planet to take care of other people, like, I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for a woman, the virus would be raging, the vaccine never would exist, because it's a woman who created it. She saved all of us, so clearly women have a role other than just taking care of men and children. So I guess that's why they're, saying that she's great, but I still can't get past the killing the kids thing. I really can't, but I don't know.
That's good. That's a good point. Actually, I want to take that, Allison, and maybe develop it a little bit. So when I was thinking about this too, why would Medea be a kind of role model, an important person in the feminist movement? I mean, it's pretty obvious that the thing that separates her from the other women in general in that culture is her agency, right? She charts her own course. She is not just going along with the flow. She decides where she wants to go and how she wants to proceed. And she makes, she is not just following in the wake of another man. She is her own person, right? So that's attractive to us in our times, right? We like women that are decisive and smart and take initiative and so on. That's something that we aspire to today. It wasn't necessarily something that women aspired to back then. Maybe they did. It's not clear. I've had some discussions with women about this in our own book club in New York, and apparently some think that maybe it was always an aspiration, just was never realized. But regardless, what's interesting to me is to compare somebody like Medea, and you mentioned individuality, to somebody like maybe Penelope, who also has individuality, but she is at the same time, she fits in probably more with kind of the traditional woman's role, right? As a mother, as this nurturing person, but at the same time, she also has her wits about her, and she tries to do the best she can do without resorting to, you know, strategizing to kill people, I guess is one way to put it. So I'm curious what you think about Medea and the backdrop of other interesting women, like, say, Penelope, or even Circe, or, you know, some of the other women that we've seen, Antigone, that are strong and smart and have some sort of purpose in their life besides just, you know, following whatever somebody tells them. What do you guys think? Is that a fair comparison, and how does it work in your mind? Katie, did you want to? Or sorry, I'm looking at. Sorry, lost track of my. Evan, you can go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. I'm thinking in terms of the other Greek heroines. I think, you know, one could say that for Antigone, hers was a noble cause. She was trying to bury her brother. And so, you know, and I don't think Antigone took anybody out. So I think there's that. But the more intriguing one is Circe, and I did read that. I read the book, and Circe is one of those characters where she's so complicated that I could see the comparison between her and Medea, and you know, especially like, you know, that was Medea was her niece, right? And so, you know, she kind of absolved her of the sin that she had before when she killed you know, she absolved her of it. Um, I think one thing with Circe is that she, you know, she was always in the business of protecting her child and protecting herself. So when she did take out people, it was in the protection of her son, and it was in the protection of, you know, herself, and then like different women that she had in her keep. Um, I think the thing about Medea is that it is she's hurt, and it is selfish. It really is. Like, Medea is a selfish individual. Like, this is all about Medea at this point. And I think that's what differentiates her. I think the comparisons, although you could see it, but I'm like Allison, the real ick factor is that she took out her own kids, right? That's the real ick factor with Medea.
What
Is
if she
that,
did? Let's pretend that she didn't take them out. Would that significantly alter your perspective on her?
well, you know, no, because then she still took out, you know, the daughter and and the king and the daughter for,
Just a little too many dead bodies laying around, right?
I mean, but it's
Just
for
one too many,
selfish
or two too many.
reasons. Yeah, like, it's for selfish reason. I think that's it. Like, she's just pissed off, and so she's just like, I'm just gonna kill. Like, and again, I say she is relatable in that, you know, we do have this drive where, you know, somebody, you know, you just want to kill some people some days, but you don't act on it, right? Because we know it's kind of crazy, right? Like, we're never gonna act on it. She plotted, she planned, she put spells on, you know, garments, and then she took people out. Like, it's hard to say that she's like, I mean, I did read where they were talking about, like, you know, she's a representative of feminism. I think she represents the anger, like Allison was saying earlier, of, you know, I've given up my life and who I am and my family for you, and you betrayed me. Now I'm gonna exact my friends. If you think about the feminist movement, especially when it first started, a lot of them people were like, a lot of those women were angry at their husbands. They were angry because they knew they were destined for more than being a wife and a child, and the society had put them in. So in a sense, they were willing to like burn it all down in a sense to get the freedom that they wanted and they needed. So I could see that comparison, because they're like, we will burn it all down before we go, if you don't give us what we need. If you look at even like before the 60s, Susan B. Anthony and the right to vote, right? You think about it, like they put her in prison, they force fed her, but she was willing to burn it all down to get the right to vote. And so I guess it's this thing of burning it all down to get the rights that they deserve. And for some people, they may have seen that as selfish. So maybe in that sense, they related to Medea. And maybe that's why. I could see why. I think that's my point. It's like I can see it. Do I agree with it? No, but I can see it.
Right, right. No, yeah, it's getting that, getting into the head of somebody like that and understanding that it's not just out there. It's, I think we started with this, right? We have that darkness in us. And, if we look at it just like, oh, well, that's interesting about her, but let's make it personal. It's part of our human nature as well. And it's not just about men versus women. It's about just being human and being slighted. But there is that Shakespearean saying, hell hath no fury as a woman spurned. So we see that. I think if there's one title that I can put on this book, this would be it. A subtitle, rather. Hell hath no fury as a woman spurned. That's the story of Medea. Let's see. I have a quote from the play I want to read. I'm curious that will fuel some more remarks from you guys. So it says, this is Medea talking. This is one of her soliloquies where she is explaining herself. She says, we're born women. It may be we're unqualified for deeds of virtue, yet yet as the architects of every kind of mischief, we are supremely skilled. So I'm curious what you guys think of this. This is around verse 405, right in the beginning there. So Medea paints a picture that women are not great at virtue, but boy, they're really good at mischief. And I don't know if this is another score in the feminist scorebook or not, but I'm curious what you think. Joe, did you have a comment? Oh, okay. Jason has some very memorable lines too, some almost humorous, and I like how Euripedes, he mixes up this tremendous tension with some humor and some, I guess, some levity in the exchange. So Jason says, I wish there was, I wish it was possible for men to have children without involving women. I mean, everybody would be better off. I mean, little did he know that we're almost pretty much at that point now where, with genetic engineering and with technology today, I mean, we're standing pretty much right at this point, at this threshold. So 2,500 years ago, men were aspiring to this. We're almost there. Be curious what he would say today if he's still thinking that's a good idea. But that's his take on the situation. Is, boy, we need women for kids, but there was some other way to do it. Allison, did you want to contribute something to that?
Men wouldn't raise them. That's the problem. I mean, they'd have, what they would do is they'd have like the robot to give them the kids, and then they'd hire another robot to raise them.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Christmas and Thanksgiving when they'd want to show up. I'm just saying this as a teacher. It's amazing how many the dads appear just before the holiday. You're like, who are you? Who are you? Although actually that has changed. That has changed a lot. I've been teaching 20. That's completely changed. I have to say that has changed. So it used to be that way. But some of the stuff I will say though, like when she's packing up the kids to go off, you're gonna go live with your new stepmommy, and it was just heartbreaking. And then when it came out that she put the spell on the blank, I laughed so hard. I really did. And I like, would I ever do it? No. Would most women do something like that? No. But it was funny. It was very funny, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I had other thoughts, but I can't think of what they are right now. I don't know. That's it for now.
What do you think about her motives in general? So we talked about she feels slighted, this, she feels that she's been betrayed. What about this motivation? One of the things that she says is, I'm paraphrasing, but basically boils down to, I don't want anybody to think of me as a type of person that can be slighted and that it would go unnoticed. So she is really trying to take care of her reputation as a fearsome and a fierce type of person. What do you think of that as a motive? Is that something that you can kind of identify with, or is that something that you think is over the top? Joe, go ahead.
I think it is over the top. I mean, the fact that you would worry about, your reputation to that point. I think that that's kind of problematic to the point where you kill your own children. But but there was as far as our motivations, and something I was just reading in the wiki page, said that, part of it could be speculated that that she felt like her children were in danger, but that, and I don't know what type of danger that would be, but nonetheless, that would be another motive, as opposed to, but that line you just read kind of kills that theory. So it really doesn't, it seems like it's more about her her personal pride, and how just basically that she's not going to be one-upped by her husband, essentially, and she'll do anything to follow through with that threat. Her intense pride is probably the most interesting thing.
Emily, go ahead.
When you read that last line, I was actually I was thinking about, she says, basically, like, I have a reputation to uphold, like, you can't get one over on me. It shows about the humiliation that she felt too. Like, she's this fierce person, and like, if she had just let it go and just like kind of went into exile, like what that would do to her reputation would be humiliating. And she's like, I am not one to be messed with. So, again, I'm like, yeah, it's extreme to kill your kids, but at the same time, she's like, well, she has to prove that she's ruthless. And I think it speaks to like her reputation as a woman, because now other people will think, oh, she's messable with, and they will go after her. Like it's a little bit of that fear, like, oh, people will think they can play me now. Like that, if you think about it, like people will think they can play me, and they can't. If you ever watch like the Godfather movies, you can see this in the men all the time, right? You know, they they will not be played with. You mess with their money, or you snitch or whatever. It's not just about the simple fact that you snitch, but it's a message that is being sent to other people to say, oh no, you better not ever think of doing this, because this will happen to you. If I can take out my own children that I birthed to get back at this man, what do you think I will do to you?
Right.
So I see the message that she is trying to send. At this point, she is like, I cannot, you can't do this to me and think that you're going to just walk away, because then other people will think they can do it too. So I see that point.
Well, she definitely is a type of person that is super memorable, right? It's hard to forget Medea, whether you like her or hate her. She makes her mark. Once you've read this play, you cannot unread it, probably, right? It's not going to go away easily. So in one way, Euripides immemorialized her forever, and made her extremely memorable. I'm just going through some of my notes to see if there's anything else. I pretty much I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Does anyone else have any additional thoughts or themes that you think we haven't explored yet? Pretty much done. I do have one other quote that I wrote down. I thought was interesting. It says, "Rulers have dangerous natures, subjected to little, controlling much. They're not inclined to relent from their passions." And this is talking about, I think, everybody here in both Jason and Medea and Creon. And this is, a pretty good summary of these types of characters that really are not afraid to tap into the darkest recesses of their nature. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing I was thinking about, like when you were asking your question about other characters that are, similar to her, what I think is interesting is like we always kind of think of like in the past, women were never strong, women were very submissive, women had a certain role. But what's kind of interesting is like that's the past of American history. Like when you actually look at other countries, there were always these strong women, I mean, all the queens in England and Marie Antoinette and Cleopatra, and there were very strong women. It's just that once, the United States started, that disappeared in this country. And it just, it's only now that you're kind of starting to see women rise up to these roles and not even getting close, like getting a fraction of the way to the roles that women have always had in many, many, many other parts of the world. So it's kind of interesting. Like we kind of think, oh, that was just what the past was, but was it really? Or was that just an abomination that was really different from what the real past was? Because, it's kind of interesting when you go back far enough, you're like, wait a minute, there are all these women that were like really strong, powerful rulers even. And then, but just not in this country. Yeah. Gilead. Right here.
All right. Anyone else? Last call. All right, so I think we're almost ready to call it a night. I do want to mention the next play that's coming up. This is going to be, we're going to switch gears and fast forward to Shakespeare. I think Euripedes is a great, again, a great segue to Shakespeare, just because of the quality and the dramatic quality and also the artfulness of Euripedes. And then, of course, Shakespeare is unmatched in the way he sets everything up. And we're going to do, I think we're going to do Hamlet first. Shrikant, we're gonna, I forget, are we doing King Lear in this round, or
I don't remember. I'm going to pull it up, but it's going to be a series of 3 plays
okay.
that we've chosen. So we'll do 3 Shakespeare plays.
Okay, great.
And
So
what comes after Shakespeare?
you kind of caught me off guard.
Okay. I'll pull that up. If you could just give me just a second.
Okay. In the meantime, while Shrikant is looking that up, I do want to call out this kind of a device that Euripides uses all the time, which is he's a master of close calls, and you can see it in this play, right? So Medea is about to be exiled, and she begs for one day of Creon. One day, that's all she needs. to wreak complete havoc on him and everyone else. And of course, Creon could have said, and Creon deliberates. It says, "Well, I probably should give in. I mean, I'm not like the tyrant. I don't want to be thought of as a tyrant. So okay, fine, you can have one day." And of course, as you're reading this, you're thinking, "Oh my God, Creon, don't give her a day. Just tell her to go now." But I mean, it's Euripedes. I mean, he is amazing. He sets all these things up. He gives you these cliffhangers. He tells you this is what's about to happen, and you're wondering, is it really going to happen? It sounds unbelievable if that this should happen. And the chorus is there to kind of also create this tension. They're like, "Oh no, what are you thinking? Come on, Medea, you can't be serious. Are you really going to kill your children?" And she says, "Yes, I will." And you still can't believe it, right? You're still wondering, so you keep reading. And so Euripides is great at creating these setups that just completely reel you in. These close calls, these reversals, and just the tension that builds up is pretty amazing to watch.
It's kind of funny watching it. I kept thinking of Hitchcock. And I was thinking Hitchcock probably learned a lot from reading this, Like there's like one scene where the children come skipping on and you're like, no, just don't know. Like you knew it was coming. But there's so many of that foreshadowing that you see in all of Hitchcock's movies. And it's interesting to see how they learn from.
Yeah, that's where they take it from, is the best. They learn from the best.
Yeah.
So Shrikant just posted the listing of plays. So it looks like we're gonna do King Lear first before Hamlet. And then we'll do Merchant of Venice to lighten up the mood a little bit. So that's
Can I say something?
Mhm.
So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to cover plays, and Phil and I talked about, how do we do this? Because the first series we did was 7 plays. Which really had kind of strong characters, strong conflicts. And we got to see that across time, across different playwrights, different styles. This time we decided, okay, how do we proceed? So what we're doing is that we're doing themes. So Greek plays, then Shakespeare, then kind of classics in the middle. And then Phil said, look, we should do some modern plays. So we came up with 3 of the modern plays, like 20th century plays. So that's the plan. I think 3, I like the number 3 because it's enough to give kind of variety. It gives, at the same time, it gives constancy across, across a bunch, and it's not too much. So I'm particularly interested in the, of course, I love Shakespeare, but the Oscar Wilde, Ibsen, and Brecht is also going to be very, very interesting.
Yes.
So that's it. I'll go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking forward to all of them. These are all classics, terrific plays. So really looking forward to going through with them.
One last comment. I do think that plays offer the best bang for the buck as far as literature goes. And nothing like it if you can find a great actual performance of it. It's rare, but I think you can find it. I don't know about, I think there are a couple of really great renditions of Hamlet that have been done, movie versions.
Many really good ones. Yeah.
So do you have any favorites here, Phil, in terms of something that people can watch in King Lear, Hamlet, or Merchant of Venice?
I don't. I have them, but they're in Russian, so that's not going to be helpful to people here. There have been really good ones, but I think I'm trying to think if they're who was it? Maybe see if Peter Stein. He's an excellent producer of the plays, so maybe just look him up, see if Peter Stein has any plays that Shakespearean plays. I know he did stage Medea, so if you find that, actually that's probably worth watching.
Okay.
Now, I do want to mention that one of the more famous performances of Medea was by Sarah Bernard, the turn of the century. So that was, if you go on Wikipedia, you will actually see a poster from that staging of Medea, quite stark and quite catchy. So
I have to tell you about this one performance of one of the Greek plays. I forget which one it was that I saw at a research division of a library in state of Washington. What they had tried to do is that they had tried to recreate what Greek sounded like, doing all the research, because Greek has this sing-song rhythm, and they were actually performing, with masks and all. So they were trying to reproduce how the Greek would have, Greek play would have actually sounded like. So that was quite an experience.
Hmm.
And then I also remember it being, I'd been to Athens, and in one of these, I don't know what it is called, amphitheater. They watched a play, Greek play there. So that was also a very special experience. I mean, what I'm saying is that reading of the play gives you some things, but the experience of actually seeing it performed, I think, is something else. I think it adds the depth to it. So that's it.
Agreed. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Tonight was really enjoyable. Thank you for participating, and we will see you in 2 weeks for Shakespeare.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks,
All
Phil.
right. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you, Phil.
Mhm.